Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where I'm super excited to announce our guest today, Tyler Clark, who I've known for a while now because I actually came on one of your podcasts that you did with Matt, and that was super cool because I guess we could get that insight into how we have that strong passion for helping others and just giving as much advice as possible for people to not only physically change themselves, but to evolve mentally as well, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important because when you change the physical, something quite magical happens on the internal as well, doesn't it? It seems to work in sync, and not a lot of people realise that until they actually start in training, and it happens, and I find that really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, your SAS Who Dares Wins appearance intrigued me as well, because that, as you know, something I applied for. And for you to get round to that final bit is like, it's epic because watching the show, it's like crazy what you go through as contestants. I'd love to hear a bit more about that and how that's challenged you mentally and physically.
Yeah, wow, where do I begin?
Yeah, I know, like it's mental. How did it even come about?
So it came about. I actually applied 3 years ago when I found out that SAS selection were accepting females because it was a real male orientated place. The females just weren't allowed to apply or even serve in the SAS. And when they broadcasted that they were allowing females not only to serve for the country but actually on the show, I was like, right, this looks good because I can always remember from a young age watching that and thinking, oh, I'd love to do that, but there was no way of doing it. So
Yeah.
when I seen females on there, I was like, right, here we go, here's my chance. And I actually failed. I applied twice and failed.
Yeah.
Didn't get through. Got to the final stages, and I thought, do you know what? Third time, let's just try one more time. And I got through the final stages and made it on to the recruits. But it's always quite difficult. Like whenever I get asked about the SAS, I honestly don't know where to start because it's not just the physical fitness that's important in the selection. It's actually more the mental side of it
Mm.
because you can train your body to do the fitness tasks. Yes, it's tough. You're dealing with all kinds of different terrains, but it's the mental aspect which is the real difficult part. And that was my main draw to applying because I've suffered from mental health from the age of 13
Okay.
and began working on myself probably from around the age of 20. So it's 10 years ago now. And I felt like I'd almost cured myself from mental health, completely off all of my antidepressants and medication, and used almost fitness as my method of dealing with it and actually getting better.
Yeah.
And I needed a way to test my mental toughness, and that was, to me at that point, was the only way that I could actually do that, because you can test your fitness and your strength at the gym, but how do you actually test your mental capacity, your emotional intelligence, your mental toughness? And it was the SAS that was like, right, that's it.
Yeah.
And I got on.
You're like, oh my God, I've got through selection. Because actually, you saying that, that was my main reason for wanting to apply myself, because I just feel like when they go through those final stages and you almost get tortured, as it were,
Yeah,
um, you'd never sort of put that upon yourself in daily life. So
yeah.
if someone else puts that on you, if you're, balaclavaed up and you're getting all of those things exposed to all of those things, like it's completely put on you. And I always thought, would I be able to last that? So it's really, relevant that you say that, because how could we test ourselves like that?
Yeah, you can't. And I didn't tell a lot of people about it that I was going on, because one, I wasn't allowed, but two, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone apart from myself. It was very personal for me. And I think the most difficult part was you were always going into the unknown. So you couldn't prepare for anything. We were doing drills through the night. We were dealing with sleep deprivation. As a bodybuilder and have been for 6 years, I am used to eating 6 to 7 meals a day.
Yeah.
At certain times, I'm in a structured routine. So that for me was a huge concern for me, because I know when it gets to that 4 5 hour mark, I'm hungry, my energy's low, and I feel a bit like shit. So I was like, right. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to deal with that. The second point is I don't train for fitness. I train primarily for getting the most muscle mass or leaning down, which is completely different to any kind of endurance or fitness training. But what I did know is that whatever they were going to throw at me, I was not going to give up.
It's like even watching the show, I just think, God, like you say, the different terrains, the different things that you're exposed to, like it's completely far-fetched from normal life. And what you touched on there as a bodybuilder, you do, although it's hard, you get set in your routines of, I'm going to eat at this time, I'm going to train at this time. And actually we live quite a privileged life because it's a choice, isn't it?
It is, yeah, yeah. And when you're in there, all of that gets took away. So I was dealing with very low food, not knowing when I was going to eat. And I've always been focused on sleep for actual wellness and progression in bodybuilding. So to have also that taken away, along with everything else, um, was it it was difficult, but also exciting, because you never get a chance or an opportunity to go through something like that in normal life, like you say. And until you're actually stripped raw, right down to your basics, like we were stripped naked, like we had all our clothes took off us on the first day. So like we're all just standing there on the first day, just met, the train has been hijacked, and the boys are all bollock naked, and we're just standing there like, right then, we've just got to get on and get through this. And I think what was quite nice is that even though it was a very personal journey, we all kind of had each other's backs and picked each other up at low points. So as a collective of all the recruits, we got each other through it.
Yeah. Do you still speak to any of the recruits now?
I do, yeah. I'm in touch with about 5 of them, and we keep in touch. And I find we're all very similar, and we like to push ourselves and progress in fitness and everything really. Just keep pushing forward. But I think probably the most difficult part of the selection was definitely the interrogation, and that was the part that I was most scared of, because how do you even prepare yourself for something like that? You have a cover story that you need to remember after being on the run on Escape and Evade for 48 hours, and that's after 2 weeks of selection training. So you're absolutely wiped and depleted before you even go into that. Yeah. And then you have the stress positions to deal with, the cold, not knowing what time of day it is. It is really tough. There was a point I was hallucinating, because I was just that far gone. That your body, it starts giving up on you.
Yeah. Would you say that because you've been through those challenges, things on a day-to-day basis, and like in a bodybuilding prep or bodybuilding in general, do you think, well, it can't get as bad as that?
Yeah, it's definitely got me through some shit days in prep. when you're on the treadmill in the morning doing fasted cardio, and you're like, oh man, this sucks. I just rewind back to them moments in the interrogation. I'm like, well, it's definitely not as bad as that.
And you competed this year, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I had a big year this year.
Yeah. And are you in off season now? What are your plans now?
I'm currently in off season. So I started this I've been in 6 months now. And I had to make a decision really, which I think as a bodybuilder, it's always quite difficult knowing how long until you go back on stage, and when you're planning to compete next. And for me, I haven't always rushed to get back on stage, but looking at where I am in my physique on that lineup. Yes, I had a really good year, but to get to the level and the standard that I want my physique to get to, I need to take at least 14 months to be able to get to that point. And it is really difficult to get my head around, because to begin with, I'm like, wow, how do I even approach this huge long-term goal? It's 14 weeks of working in the background. You know, there's nothing really. You know, you've got to motivate yourself to get through that, because when you've got a show date, it's like, well, it's got to happen regardless. Yeah. But when you're in an off season, you need to keep yourself motivated and keep progressing. You know, it's not a time you relax, you actually work harder.
Yeah, so, and it's that mind warp, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is.
Yeah, and it's really hard. Like this time, you know, during the off season when everyone's coming off the back of their competitive season, and a lot of people that listen are at that point where they're going into off season, that sort of body dysmorphic type thoughts, and you know, you like you say, there's an end date when there's a prep, whereas in an off season, I'm doing the same as you. I'm doing a longer off season to, you know, if you want to gain muscle mass, that's what you have to do. But it's like 14 months or beyond that. It seems such a long time to just be pushing up for.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, you have to take a little bit of time just to get your head around that, I find, and actually break it down. Otherwise, you don't plan it right, and you maybe don't push as hard, and you have to take that time to be like, right, am I going to be comfortable in summer next year? I'm not going to be in any shape for a bikini. Like I'm
not.
And you know, it's like I'm gonna be uncomfortable, yes, but actually the goal that I'm aiming towards, maybe it's a bit bigger than looking good in my bikini in summer, you know.
Yeah, and that is bodybuilding, isn't it? It's an extreme sport at both ends, you know. The off season, if you are trying to gain quality muscle tissue, it takes time, and it's often you get to that point in an off season where you start to become uncomfortable in regards to, you know, clothes are tighter and things like this, and then it's almost like you've got to then push past that for maybe another 4 to 8 weeks or a little bit longer, and it's like, oh god, I'm just gonna have to suck this up. And especially that acute post-show period, you know, even the first 3 months, it's really hard to let go of that stage condition, but it's just not something you can maintain, is it?
It isn't, no. When you're in that post show, I don't know about you, Sarah, but this year, because I ran 6 shows kind of back to back and really pushed to next level pushing on my final show, I really did nearly give up. I had COVID between it as well, and it just wiped me out. So I wasn't in a great way after that show, and it really took me about 2 months to actually get back to decent levels of enjoying training. I lost all of my motivation to train. Yes, it was still getting done because it's in there, but my actual love for training did go for around 2 months after that show. And my strength was so low, I was getting headaches. Like I really did feel shit.
Yeah, you do though, don't you? I was saying to Matt, my other half, yesterday, like it's almost like the stuffing's been knocked out of you, and you've got this like lag of energy. Like you're just not quite there, and you think, oh, you know, for me, it's nearly been 2 months, and I think, oh, it should be coming back to normal now. But even things like my menstrual cycle it's still not here, you know, and you still get elements of, I guess, like a fatigue that's in the background all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. It really took a long time for that fatigue to go away, and it's only really been in the last, you know, 14 weeks that I've had that energy creeping back up and seeing my strength come back, and that is with having the extra body fat on my body. I was trying to hold that lean composition, and as soon as you think, right, no, this isn't the goal now. Yes, you know, it's and it's difficult because we work so hard to get to that point in prep, don't we?
This is it. Like, it's so tunnel vision, and you know, you're probably the same. You reflect back and you think, fucking hell, I don't know how I even survived some of those days, because you're on, you know, such low calories, high expenditure. For some reason, you have this, I don't know, it's almost like a strength within you that just keeps you going while you're in it. And then you look back and you think, how did I even do that?
An inner warrior.
It's crazy. Do you find that what you learn in the SAS selection helped in the prep in regards to sort of mindset and pushing through that struggle?
I do, yes. I do think that I've had a lot of that I've worked on myself, and I think that's something that bodybuilding teaches you. Because I'd been bodybuilding for 3 years before the SAS, I'd learned to deal with feeling uncomfortable. I'd learned to deal with pushing through no matter how difficult it feels on that day, because it's not forever.
Yeah.
And I always find if the goal that you're working towards is something that you're really wanting to achieve and go to, then you will put your heart and soul into it. And I think that's the beauty of bodybuilding.
Yeah, it is. It can even make or break you. It's surprising
Yeah.
actually how many people sort of commit to a prep, and a lot of people don't either see it through or actually get to stage. And I think we sometimes forget that as bodybuilders, and something I often reference on the pod, even getting to stage and completing your prep, if you can go, I did everything in my power, that is an achievement in itself. It's that journey.
It is, that's right.
Yeah. And it's so easy to, I guess, base your success on placings, but it's not all about that.
Oh no, the placings, that's almost like a byproduct of all of the work and the learning that you've done along the way, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So are you figure category?
I compete in figure, yeah.
Yeah. And was your feedback to gain more muscle? Is it something you've reflected on?
It's something that I've reflected on. So this year I won every competition. I made it to the British Championships with the two bros.
Yeah.
And when I stood on that lineup, I was the feeling of actually getting to that stage for me was a huge achievement, because I never thought I would get to that standard and look the way that I did in terms of condition, muscle density, and looking from last year to this.
Yeah.
The change in the figure look for me was huge. So to get to that point, I was more than happy with.
Yeah.
And then once I got my feedback through and actually looked at the comparisons, that's when it's really clear to where the next kind of step is. And I think that's really important to know and be able to actually critique yourself, not in a negative way, but actually think, right, this is where I can now improve.
Yeah.
So how long are we looking at to do this, and how are we going to do that? And that's why I need that 14 months, because I do need more density to be better than this year. I do need more muscle mass. I need more shoulders, more quads, and actual overall mass. So it isn't going to come easy, and it's not going to come in 6 months of off season.
Yeah, and we've been there. It's so easy to go to stage every year, and this is my first time not going to stage next year, and it is quite a daunting feeling, because even in an off season, I'd be thinking, right, it's like you say, 6 months or 6 to 8 months. The longest I've ever done is 10 months, and you always know there's a cup coming after that. So of course it's like, well, I can push up to be uncomfortable, and it won't be too long till I get to cut again. And now it's like, wow, I'm in the abyss.
Yeah. But I think, Sarah, as well, it's quite nice because you almost look at all your variables, especially the nutrition side, and you actually make sure that you're dialed in on every single aspect. So it's like, right, my training needs to be on point, knowing what areas we need to improve on. Yeah. Also, my nutrition is on point, because we don't want to be gaining, 8 to 10 kilograms too quickly. We want to prolong this off season and keep growing and keep the body responding for as long as possible before having to do maybe a mini cut or recomposition phase in this off season. We want to keep that going for as long as possible, and that's something that I'm really starting to enjoy, and actually seeing the strength increasing and just feeling better in yourself and actually healthy is a nice feeling, and actually putting health as a priority in an off season, and just feeling, you feeling better in yourself, feeling more energetic, sleeping better, having your cycle back, enjoying training, enjoying even more flexibility and time with friends or working on business. And once you look for the positives in a longer off season, there's plenty to be found, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely gold for anyone going into this phase for a longer period, because I find that, after a show, we've all had post-show experiences that haven't gone as we'd want them to, with eating a lot and various other things. And I find that going into this longer off season, I definitely would say that I've got that mindset like yourself, where I've got that long period of time and I want to, you know, hang on to a level of condition while I gain muscle, and do it slowly and enjoy the process and create memories with friends and family. It's so, so important to be able to embrace that. But as bodybuilders, we become very isolated and confined in our own walls. Like, we sort of almost bring it on ourselves and shut other people out that aren't bodybuilders. And it's so easy to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I do think that I don't know what it could be, but I do think that bodybuilding as a whole, that there must be something that we can kind of do or create to help. I think podcasts are great, but actually to help create, I don't know what the word is, but support each other and just take people out of that isolation, and knowing that you're not on your own and that there is other people in the same position, in the same journey as you, in either prep or off season. But
Yeah.
once you're in that place, like sometimes on the more difficult days, like you can just feel like it's you against the world, can't it? When it's really not. And I think bodybuilding needs to be put up as a sport like football and rugby, and have the same kind of support and things behind it. I really do, because it is more extreme than them sports anyway.
Yeah, this is what I often think, like, we don't have piss ups at the weekend, or, all the things that are associated with socializing around a sport, which a lot of sports do. We're constantly, every single day, we're hitting macros, we're training, we're recovering, we're doing all of these things, posing practice, everything that goes into a prep. And then after the prep is done, it's suddenly like, wow, what do I do now? I've been institutionalized for however long. And it's a mind warp, and it can breed so many neurotic behaviors, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I find the post show, um, especially for first time competitors, really difficult. I think it's important to know what the next goal is at that point,
Mm.
because if you compete and then you're dealing with post show, obviously hormones are all over the place, emotions are all over the place. You also get that fatigue and that tiredness hit you like a ton of bricks. It does. It almost wipes you out. It happens every time with all of my shows, no matter how much care I take with, making sure I either reverse properly or getting the right nutrition and sleeping, it hits you. So you have to be prepared and know, do I need to take maybe 2 or 3 weeks off training? What does my body need at this point to get my health back, and also mentally be able to deal with it as well. And that's where having the next goals in place is really important.
Yeah, and this is where it comes back to it being a journey, isn't it? That those milestones all along the way, after a show, the first bit is recovery, but is there some things that you can sort of set yourself in your mind as mini goals that you can start to aim for? And then I work with my coach to have a plan for, the whole 18 months. We've got ideas of what we want to be achieving all the way along, and you then still feel like you're accountable and your efforts are worth it. But it's like social media, when you're in a prep, there's so much to put on, and everyone's sharing their photos, and then people go into off season and it's like, oh, they've disappeared.
Yeah, why have we always got clothes on now?
It's crazy. It's so crazy.
I do
Oh.
find one of the best ways. This isn't for everyone. This is just a way that I deal with post show and actually gaining body fat. But it's what I've learned, and it might work for other people. But it's just, trying to take away the focus of the skills that you've had right through prep, just taking that focus away from that, and actually enjoy feeling strong. Like, if you can go more on actually how you're feeling rather than how you're looking, it
Yeah.
really drives you through reversing and off season, and actually begin to set these mini goals of maybe PBs. It might be some of the bigger compound lifts. Like for me, I want to be able to do the, pull-ups and rows. I want to be fitter in that respect and actually hit some new PBs in squats, and finding the beauty in strength rather than the beauty in actually how you look. And I find that really useful for any competitor in off season.
Yeah, sure. Do you have any things when it comes to mindset that you use to sort of come away from that body dysmorphic feelings and thoughts that you can get post show? Is there certain things that you incorporate?
There is with my clients, but for me myself, it's not something that I have majorly struggled with. So I haven't had to deal with that. I just know that the feeling of when you are lean, it can be so difficult to watch the lines disappearing and feeling clothes getting tighter even more. So I'm not being stereotypical, but as a female, we're always expected to be dieting and losing weight. So then when we're actually putting weight on, like one of the comments I get so much is after the shows is, oh, you're not training anymore. And I'm like, yeah, like hell yeah, I'm training harder than ever. And you learn to just deal with comments like that. But that I find with body dysmorphia, you really have to, you are worth more than actually how you're looking. If you can then internalize actually how am I feeling and work with that rather than what you see in the mirror, because that's only just a small part of who we are. And if you let that image reflect into your goals, it's going to stop you from achieving the bigger goals that you set yourself if they are in bodybuilding, because you have to go and you have to go in the off season and gain the extra body fat. And it's almost like the second part of the identity, isn't it? It's a second part identity to bodybuilding. You've got your prep and you've got your off season, and you should be proud of that.
Yeah, like you say there about comments, it's something that I've learned over the years to be able to almost, when I get these comments that are superficial, I guess, I tend to just think, the person that's saying it generally doesn't really know much about bodybuilding, or they're trying to say it from maybe a place of caring because they've seen you prep and then they say, oh, you're looking much bigger now, and it's like, bigger? But you've got to think of it from their point of view. They've seen you get shredded, and then it's like they're worrying about you, so for them that's a positive thing. And it these types of comments, they're so throwaway, but it can easily really fuck with your head when you haven't say it's your first prep and you're going into your off season. But I'm able to sort of see it as an uneducated comment, but it is tough because people that aren't into bodybuilding will not understand it at all.
No. And I think at the same time we shouldn't expect them to either.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
It's such a personal journey, bodybuilding. Yes, you have the closest ones around you, which hopefully they understand that obviously they're living with you. But from outside, not a lot of people will understand, and there's so much really to take. And unless you've got an interest there for bodybuilding, we shouldn't expect people to be interested. I think it's important to have that close network around you that do actually care, that they do give a shit about how you're feeling and how your bodybuilding's journey is going, but they need to have a bit of understanding of what bodybuilding is to be able to do that.
Yeah. And do you find that in your circle and the people around you being open and honest and trying to almost educate the people that aren't into bodybuilding that are around you, does that help with communication with them?
It, to a degree, yes, but even close family members, they don't understand what's going on internally. Like I can try and speak to my parents about it, and even they've had 6 years of listening to me going on about prepping and off season and everything to do with bodybuilding, and yet they still don't understand the finer details because they haven't lived it, they haven't felt it.
Yeah. I think that's also relevant to try and understand that until you've done this and really put yourself through a diet, especially getting stage condition, it's very hard to put it into words what it does to you. And like you said right at the start, the mental evolution that you have from doing a prep is crazy. And like you also said, you know, I don't think people expect the feelings that you're going to get. And, you know, there's so much more clarity. Like the first prep I did, I thought, wow, like I almost know more of what I want, where my life is heading, what direction I want to go in. And then that's evolved as I've done it more and more.
Yeah, I honestly find that bodybuilding helps with confidence so much. And that's because we all want more confidence.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you actually get that? And bodybuilding for me has got me more confidence. And that's because every day we are committed to our goal and we actually take an action every single day to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like to let ourselves down. If we're needing to get extra steps and extra cardio, we'll get it done. And it's just continuously, it's repetition of doing this day in, day out. And that's what builds confidence in yourself. So that's something that I really like about bodybuilding.
Yeah, for sure. And at the start, you said about mental health from a young age. Do you think we could delve into that a little bit more? Is that something you're comfortable to talk about?
Yeah, definitely.
So how did that sort of come about? Was it something that your parents picked up on, or was it something you knew you were battling against something?
No, this was something that I knew I was battling with.
Yeah.
It's difficult to actually find out what caused that
Yeah.
because there were so many different moving parts in my childhood with hanging around with the wrong people. I was drinking a lot on the streets as a 13-year-old. My parents went through a divorce that went on for a couple of years. I had an abusive boyfriend. There were so many different parts that I can't put my finger on exactly what it was, whether it was a combination of them all.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I also felt really lost when I was younger. Like I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know what I was aiming towards. And I just looked around like an outsider.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it had such a spiraling effect on my mental health to the point where I tried to commit suicide 4 or 5 times. I self-harmed twice. I was on antidepressants, as I said, at 13.
Yeah.
And then when I was pregnant at the age of 18, I developed pre and postnatal psychosis.
Okay.
So this was then with all of my hormones increasing and decreasing throughout the pregnancy. It just set a spark in my mental health, and that was a really difficult time. That was when it kind of hit its worst because I needed intervention from the mental health support team for about a year during and after the pregnancy.
Must be hard as well because you've suddenly got a person to look after, haven't you?
That was it, yeah. And I was a young mum, but it was planned, and I was not expecting my mental health to kind of hit that point where I was almost out of control with it. But I definitely think that having my son at that age, even though in my mental state, I was really struggling, he actually got me through that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I'd found fitness, because at this point I was really overweight as well. All of the medication I was in put on, it was like 8 stone I put on. So I was a size 16 to 18 at this point, borderline diabetic, and in a real mess. And it was fitness what actually got me healthier, cured my mental health, and taken that time to actually reflect, because that's what training does, doesn't it? It gives you that time out. You've got controlled pain, and that's something that I think that we all need to experience because we're wrapped up in comfort and cotton wool sometimes, and that's from every angle, from media to even going to work in some places. And you must have some level of controlled pain within your life in training or in fitness, or even challenges in work. Some people like to push themselves on a professional aspect, which gives them that kind of mental pain to deal with. And I do think it's important to have that, to be able to reflect and build yourself back up and build up them strong blocks to become better and stronger.
Yeah, for sure. And that's sort of the ethos of the pod, isn't it? Finding strength in struggle. It's so easy, like you say, to find, even as a bodybuilder, find your comfort zones in regards to, when your food is, when your training is, where your gym is, everyone at the gym, your household is set for your goals. And then, we then go into like an off-season phase and get invited to interact socially and things like this. And I work with a lot of people that actually, it freaks them out more to go into social scenarios, which is out of their comfort zone, than to just be in a prep. And I myself have had that for, years. It's not till probably the last couple of off seasons where I'm like, okay, I can go into a restaurant and order from a menu. But way back at the start, like, I would just be thinking about it for days before. And then, I'd be obsessively looking at the menu thinking, what am I going to have? What if they've run out? And, I'd be premeditated before I even got there as to what I was going to have. I'd visualize the food I was going to eat, how it would look, how it would taste. And it's these sorts of behaviors and thoughts and feelings that we have that I think sometimes get forgotten when you're going into that off-season phase. If you haven't got a coach or people to confide in, it's such a lonely place, isn't it?
It is. It does worry me how many people might be out there kind of trying to do it on their own.
Yeah.
Because I do find, with bodybuilding and every level of sport or fitness or even lifestyle, you need to have that person in your corner just to keep you mentally on track and physically on track, because it's one hell of a journey. Like that's the only word to describe it.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like, also, being able to just have that person to go, you're looking like you're on track, or if you're not, manipulations can be made, because it's very hard to make those decisions based on yourself. You're looking at yourself every day, you look at check-in shots, and we're all so critical about ourselves. Like, you always look at the area where you store the most fat straight away, and it's like, oh no, I'm not on track. I am on track. And then you get bad days, good days, and it's, when you're in a prep, you're depriving yourself, you're in a deficit, and that might become quite a severe deficit. So, your mind plays tricks with you. Things start to happen and you're not often aware of it until you start to sort of catch yourself, and there's certain things that slip, isn't there? It's crazy.
That's right. We can respond emotionally, which is not what you want to do in bodybuilding. And that's why it's so important to have that outside eye, to have that unemotional connection that can make the right decisions, whether that be pulling food up, down, or output up or down. Because if we rely on ourselves to do that from an internal aspect, if we're having a shitty day, like it could go either way. We could either make changes and push harder, or we could think, oh, I need to back off a little bit. So it can be so difficult to make those changes. Or even if we have our hormones, where our cycle's meant to be, or if it is still there, we can feel more hungry and think, wow, I must need to push my food up, and then we can make mistakes. So having an outside eye to make these details, these changes in the right places is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Like you say there about hunger, I find in a prep, I'm hungry, but I get to the point where it's like, well, I'm going to be hungry. So I divorce myself from that feeling and just roll with it. Whereas I then find that you have that post-show period, you start to reverse out and you're starving, or you feel like you're starving. And it's like, I could just eat so much. And of course, this is where it becomes that tricky territory, with regards to having that freedom with food after your show.
Yeah, it's definitely the most difficult. And I do think that we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves either.
Yeah.
Because I do find that's another huge problem. We can go in with all the best intentions and think, right, I'm going to do this reverse properly. I'm going to stay on track. I'm not going to binge out. But do you know what? Like, if you do, then you do. You know, we're just human, and you can pull it back on track and make better decisions next time. And each time you maybe mess up like that, you tend to make better choices the next time around. And it's again just going through that process. It helps to develop you.
Yeah, I for sure think that, you know, you almost have to experience it to then be able to come away from it. I had Tim on the pod and he was saying, you know, after his first show, he put on 2 stone in days, which is remarkable. I've never heard of that much weight
Wow.
gain. But he
Yeah.
just said like he was eating towards almost being sick and then stopping. And then 3 hours later, he'd be like, oh, what should I eat now? And then every day he was eating donuts, sitting in his dressing gown in the morning for breakfast. And then it would be, oh, what should I have for lunch? And then he said, you know, after that experience, he never went back to that. And after a show now, he'll go for a nice meal or whatever. But I've done it, you know, eat until I'm almost sick because you're not able to have those foods. And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, I've got to make sure I fit a bit of everything. Can you also,
Yeah.
you know, social media plays a part here. Like you see
Yeah.
everyone doing it. So you're like, first timer, you go in and you think everyone's going, you must want some of this, or you see someone have some of this and you think, I don't even like that food. Why am I eating it?
Yeah, it's like I can have it now, so it's okay. But yeah, I do think something's quite useful. I do something called trigger foods. So I have trigger foods, especially around post show. That if I allow myself to have them, like it really would just trigger off like a binge. I can't say no to them. And it's all of my I have such a sweet tooth, so it's things like cookies. Like I will literally I can remember one shot, I got the cookies and I had one and I warmed it up in the microwave. So it went all gooey and had ice cream with it. And it was honestly like the best cookie. But I couldn't stop. Like I could not stop that feeling. It was it was so good. But
It's
that's a trigger food.
and my capacity with sweet stuff, like, you know, it's never ending. And when Matt
Yeah.
and I sometimes have, you know, incorporate a cookie or whatever it is, there's so many different things you can get now. Like you have it and you're like, I don't feel like I've eaten.
No, give me more.
I always find I have like I make slushy things out of whey protein with some water. So I'll have like a large one of them and some strawberries first. And then I'm like, let's lead into the main event. But even things like that, you know, post show, if you've worked with your coach and they're saying, you know, have a few days off, you can
Yeah.
start to sort of plot it out and work out, you know, maybe have your sweet treat after you've had a meal. So you're then maybe not going to lead into having so many of them, or, you know,
Yeah.
try and get it in your head. But like you said before, you know, don't be too hard on yourself if you do these things that, you know, it gets out of control, because you can rein it back in. But
Yeah.
it's trying to notice that you've done that. If there's trigger foods, if there's trigger environments or even people, then trying to notice that and be able to get back on track rather than sort of go into this hole, which is very common as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You must there's never a fail on a reverse. And the, there's never really a right or a wrong way to do it, because everybody's so different and deals with it emotionally different as well. And it's if you did get a feeling where you maybe went overboard, maybe just see if anything triggered that, or if there's any lessons to be learned off that. How could you maybe handle that better next time, and not pull yourself down too much, because the prep isn't easy. Mentally and physically, you're giving it your all.
Yeah.
And I think that there is that line, you have to have that little bit of downtime with those nice foods, because you've not had them for so long. But after so long, you will get back on track. You will bounce back. You will.
Yeah, it's allowing yourself to, I always say to people, you know, be kind to yourself. And I always
Yeah.
try and do that to myself, because
Yeah.
every post show it's very different. Like it doesn't really matter, I find, what placing you've got, how well you've done. Because for me, like it sounds like yourself, you know, I do the prep to the letter. I'll pour
Mm-hmm.
into it. So consequently, you know, whatever my placing is, I know I've done my best. And even after winning shows, the next day you still wake up and you think, I am fucked. Like it's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's like this, it's so weird as well. It's like you've done this whole prep, you've lived on hardly any food, you've trained and everything else, and you've kept going. And then that dump after a show, it's
Yeah.
like, holy shit, it's like you've been hit by a truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And then especially if you're doing back-to-back shows, it's very hard to negate, isn't it?
Yeah, see, this is what I found quite interesting. I found my back-to-back shows a lot easier to run than maybe having just one or two.
Yeah.
There was even a show, so I competed and then went out after the show, got all of my steps in to get everything on plan that day, and continued for the next week and hit it again at the weekend.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. It's not for everyone. You have to make sure that the reasons is personal to yourself and that it's something that you want to do.
Yeah.
But for me, I wanted to gain more experience. I wanted to check out some different federations, and I was just enjoying myself. I was enjoying the process, and I thought, well, I'm feeling good. Why the hell not? And that very last show was the one that I wanted to get to the most. That final 2 week that absolutely sucked. That was the one that meant the most to me. It wasn't a huge show, but it was where my bodybuilding journey began, and I'd not been in that on that stage in 5 years. So it meant so much. So I did make it to that one, but I really learned a lot about doing the back-to-back shows and how much I could actually control post-show, and that it wasn't essential for me to, after a show, because everyone's having post-show treats, that I need to have them too. Yeah. Like, because I've got another goal like that I need to get stuck into. So let's go.
It's great. I find as well, like you said though, back-to-back shows where there's like a week in between, I really like that. It's when you get like, I've done it where it's 3 weeks or more, it is quite a dig.
Yeah. And that's when you've really got a fucking dig. I think you have to prepare yourself for that, because you think, oh, it's only 3 weeks, it's not long. But man, them 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, they can be tough. So you do mentally have to prepare yourself for that, because it isn't easy. You almost have to maintain for a week or 2 weeks and then really push on again. Yeah. And it's prolonging your prep from maybe, I don't know, 16, 18, 20 weeks to maybe 24, 28 weeks or longer.
Yeah. And you don't have that post-show experience, do you? Like you say, you go out and you get your steps and maybe have a bowl of oats or something, and then you're back to it the next day.
Yeah. So yeah, with that, I definitely think a mental preparation is good. Write down your motivators, the reasons why you're doing it, because if you're not keeping motivated through that, it will be very easy to give up when things get tough, because they will. But yeah, they're the special ones. They're the ones that you really grow and you develop in bodybuilding, I find.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find that when you first did a prep, your first ever prep, did you thrive off the struggle, finding that strength in there to be able to keep pushing, to be able to get to stage?
No, I only started to develop the strength and struggle around 2 years into my bodybuilding, because when I began, I'd only really been training for around 6 months and decided I wanted to compete.
Oh, okay.
So I had so much learning to do with bodybuilding. So for me, it was just really nice to have a schedule and an end goal to actually stand on stage with a bikini. So that for me got me through the whole very first prep. But then once I found out that I've got a real passion for this, and it's what I absolutely love to do, because I spent every minute of the day researching and watching videos and speaking with people, that I then found out what a real prep was, because that first one wasn't a real prep, because my condition was not there.
Well,
so, yeah. What was that, Sarah?
We do have that though, don't we? Like, I've done preps where I haven't had the condition, and it's not been as hard as when I've really dug for condition.
Yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's crazy as well, because you have to, like, for me, I had to run really low calories for, like, I was on 1,000 calories for 12, 13 weeks, and expenditure was right up, steps were right up, and it's like, it's just mental when you look back at it. And when you go to off-season macros, you're like, bloody hell, I'm eating 3 times the amount and doing less.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. How have you found this reverse out did you find that you had a bit of time after your last show and then you went into off season, or how did you sort of format it?
Yeah, so I had 1 week off the gym after my shows. But this was when I had a real, like, I really hit that wall and was so tired. Mentally, I was exhausted. Physically, I was exhausted. I had the post kind of COVID going on. And I actually had a holiday to Mexico 2 weeks after it.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I know. So this was causing huge anxiety. Like, I was so nervous about this because I knew what was in store for me. I knew the food I was going to be dealing with. I was already starving, hungry. So I put a lot of focus in that first 2 weeks to get myself back to almost a normal human functioning human being, should we say?
Normal and inverted commas. Like, it's so crazy how long it takes.
Because that did not happen. I went to Mexico and I was still really tired. So this was the first time I didn't actually train for another 2 weeks in Mexico. Mm-hmm. I also I ate what I wanted.
Yep.
There was a few days where I had definitely more than I should have. It was all inclusive. The food was amazing. But I split my meals into 3 meals a day rather than a kind of a bodybuilding split. So I would have like my breakfast, my main, and my pudding. And I put a lot of focus into goodness. So I was getting all of the fresh fish. I was having loads of fruit. And yes, I was having like loads of waffles and all of the other good stuff as well, because that, that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I decided. Anyway, got back, weighed myself, and actually only put on 3 pounds. Which I was really surprised with. I wanted a mental break, a physical break, and that's definitely what I got in Mexico, and came back, structured my training, and slowly began progressing food up and progressing body weight up. And I do think this has been the most productive and best off season I've had so far in terms of slow weight gain and body responding.
Yeah, it's a nice feeling, isn't it? Like, it does again come with experience and knowing your own body and sort of how to push up, how to put intention into training, how to get back on track. But it's a really nice feeling to see your body gaining muscle, but not feeling like, you're gaining a lot of fat at the same time. It's a slow progression. And I find for my own mental health as well, it's nice to be able to do that slowly. I don't want to, push right up straight away, because it adds to that stress of, oh my God, my body's changing, I'm much bigger. It is hard.
Yeah, it is. I do find that the kind of the slower approach that I've had this time has been much better, but it's so difficult because every single reverse has been different. There's been times where I felt fine and been able to train, a few days later. There's been a time where I've wanted to train the next day. There's so many different variables that you really have to have an initial plan of what it's going to look like, but then go on day to day, actually, how am I feeling? How is my, is training actually going to make me feel shit for longer? Because what I've figured out is actually what's best for me is not to rush back to the gym in the first 2 weeks and not feel bad for that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is where working with a coach is really good, because, some days you might think, okay, so I just feel really fatigued, and there can be a lower capacity for steps maybe that day. So if you've got a range, so some days you might do a little bit over your steps. On that day, you might think, right, I'm going to pull it down to 8,000, say, and then the next day when you feel a bit better, you can do a bit more, and you can be more flexible with things like that when you've got, I guess, the guidance from a coach and learning, that not everything has to be hit exactly on the same day. Things like macros, you can be a bit more flexible. I don't know how you approach sort of off plan, or if you were to go over on your macros one day, the next day you might reduce them slightly. You can do that, but I think that we become we bring this stress on ourselves that we have to do everything exact. But when you're coming out of a prep, you've got to be pretty bang on. But this is a time where you can just enjoy life a little bit more.
Yeah, Yeah, and I do think as well, Sarah, everyone's just so different again with the approach,
Yeah.
because for some, myself included in this, I do like to be still quite structured after my show. I find that works better for me.
Yeah.
If I get a free for all and it's like, right, I have, the next 3, 4, 5 days, whatever it is, off plan, and relax, enjoy yourself, have what you want, I feel lost.
Yeah.
And I know it can be quite difficult to have a show and feel like you're almost going to a plan, and that might not be for everyone because there's other ways of doing it as well.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I find it better to still have something to follow. And it might be a case of, right, I'll increase my oats at this meal, or I might have some more Biscoff on my oats, just little treats like that will actually feel really fucking amazing at the time.
Yeah, legit. Like one spoonful of Biscoff. Hello.
Yeah. Or it might be having more flexibility and having more of a calorie target, and having some different food selections, or having 1 or 2 off-plan meals, depending again how that person is, because someone might go for an off-plan meal and it might turn into a binge, or it can be so different. And it's just finding out actually how you work, and how, what way you like. So if you like more structure, if you like more flexibility, if having more flexibility is going to make you, go more off plan, then maybe don't go that way. There's so many moving parts.
Yeah, it's really nice for the listeners as well to hear this, because it is so individual. Bodybuilding it's a sport that you can end up putting a lot of pressure on yourself, whether that's through watching other people on social media, or feeling like you should do this or you should do that, or things in a certain way, but actually it's bespoke to you in so many different ways. Like you say, there's so many moving parts, and you don't know how your body's going to respond at any phase. I've done preps that have felt not easy, but easier. Other preps where, you hit plateaus and you've got to really dig low on the food and really put expenditure up. And, there's so many different things, and it's so bespoke. It's crazy. It blows my mind. You automatically think you put yourself in a huge deficit, you'll lose weight, but it doesn't always happen like that.
No, it doesn't.
And the same with off season, it's with my coach, it's like, I check in twice a week, once with photos, once with weight and how I'm feeling. And, sometimes it's like, right, let's push the calories up. Other times it's keep them the same. And I never really know what's going to happen. And it's quite nice, really, because I give him the reins and I just do. Whereas, like, people that coach themselves, I'm like, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I don't know, you almost have to emotionally disconnect from yourself. Does that make sense? Like, I have to disconnect myself from my emotions.
Yeah.
And that's both in prep and in off season. Like, in off season, I look in the mirror and think, well, I'm definitely putting weight on.
Yeah. We're so bad at this, aren't we?
Some more food, put some more
You know what though? Like Matt always says to me, he's like, you do realize that when you're even at the height of your off season, probably 80% of women are going, oh, I wouldn't mind having that body, but we're like, I'm massive.
Yeah, that's a very valid point as well. Yeah, like in off season, like when we're in our kind of peak end of off season, like there's we still look great. You look great at any point, and I think, yeah, you cannot be so overcritical of yourself, because I bet training's going so well at that point in off season, when you are, at peak off season, and like, the mass that you're gaining and the improvements that you're making, it's all happening. And you've also got that time with your family, you've got all of them nice meals that you're having and social time, and there's so many positives there. Just for carrying a little bit of extra fat, like it's really not that bad.
Yeah, for sure. And like with you making memories with your family, child, things like this that you don't get, your child's not going to be that age forever, and
Yeah.
it's important for you to be able to be a mum and a bodybuilder and a daughter and a friend. But you do forget that sometimes bodybuilding can breed this, like, if you're not doing everything to the letter all the time, you're not a good bodybuilder. And I've certainly struggled with that in the past. And then you realize you are allowed to be happy and a bodybuilder.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy. It's so crazy. And enjoying the process as well.
Yeah, that was something that I really took on board this year, was actually enjoying feeling shit, should we say?
I know. I actually like it. Like, I love prep. I'm like, I feel like shit, but it must be working.
Yeah, yeah. But I really learned to love that process of pushing hard and getting so much done in the day, and them days where you kind of question yourself, thinking, can I do this? And you get everything done, you go to bed with a smile on your face, and you wake up the next day that 1% stronger.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
It's like in prep, I'm like, I can go to bed knowing I've done everything with a smile on my face, get up, right, this is what I need to do, go to bed with a smile on my face. And I take each day as it comes, because I think if you premeditate it too much and you really are pushing in a prep, you're going to put pressure on yourself that you do not need at that point. You need minimal stress and you need to just be able to, box off each day as it comes.
yeah, and I find when you look hard enough, you can really find like the happiness as well. Like, when you have a good training session, or you have a full day with meals on track, or you get that little buzz in your cardio, or even just getting you obviously out for more steps. Like, you see things that you maybe wouldn't normally see. You have more times listening to podcasts. Like, there's so many little journeys, but I think from the mental aspect, the amount of like inner growth that you do, and inner toughness that you create within a prep without realizing, is something that you really should be grateful for. Because to even get to stage is an achievement on its own. But when you actually look at the journey from starting prep to that stage, that is where the real you is. That journey there.
What a way to sum up the pod today. It's been so nice to have that reflection, because a lot of the listeners will gain a lot from that, just realizing how much you are achieving on a daily basis as well. And we do have a lot of first timers listening to the pod. May I ask you what your biggest bit of advice would be to a first timer listening?
A first timer, I would say, please stop looking on socials and comparing yourself to people on socials and pro athletes and, people up there that's at a higher level than you. One, it might put you off, because you will pull yourself down and rip yourself apart thinking, I'm not as good as her or him. And that can really knock you, and that's going to stop you enjoying your journey. And then the second thing kind of ties in line with that, is to stop comparing yourself to others. As a first timer, it's the journey that you're on is absolutely amazing. So you stay in your own lane, focus on yourself, fuck what everyone else is doing. They're on a different journey to you.
Amen.
So you stay in your own lane, focus on your variables, focus on what you can control, and just make it to that stage in the best possible place that you can, knowing that you've ticked everything along the way.
Yeah, that's so good. That is gold, Tyler. Thank you so much for today. It's been awesome.
It has. I've enjoyed that. I could talk for hours.
I know, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like there's so much. This is what I love about doing the podcast, because there's so much we can share as experienced competitors, and it's about empowering others and helping people realize their own achievements within this sport and outside of that. So it's really nice to have someone on exactly the same wavelength on as a guest.
Yeah, definitely.
And perhaps we can get you on when you're at the height of your off season to talk about how much of a boss bitch you are.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm strong as fuck.
And if anyone wanted to message or follow you on Instagram, what is your Instagram handle?
It's Tyler Clark without an E _coaching.
Cool. Okay. And as always, if anyone wants to share this episode on their stories, Tyler and I would be very grateful, because it's nice to know that people are gaining things from the pod, and any golden nuggets they pick up, we would love to hear them share. So thank you again, Tyler.
Thank you.
And happy Christmas.
Yeah, happy Christmas. I'm not long to go.
See you later.
See you later.